Hello, hello, this is Carissa and Tom on Tentacles, the podcast from Crown and Reach. We are feeling our way through the murky waters of strategy and operations in an uncertain world.
We are. I'm putting off my need to go to Screwfix and get some sort of, what is it, like a self-tapping screw to go through a girder. Anyway,
I'm gonna be out of town while this is happening. I'm gonna run away to my parents.
Yeah, you came up with the plan. I have to deal with the drilling in metal.
Absolutely, I'm just home backing into a hedge to disappear while you do the grunt work.
Yeah, it's a nice experiment, isn't it, that we're trying at home?
Oh, I see where this is going. Hey. Yes, we were dithering between two different topics, and now I see we're going to talk about experimentation.
Yes, experimentation under scarce resources, I think. Or what did someone say? There is sort of complexity of abundance and complexity of scarcity.
Oh, complexity of abundance and complexity of scarcity, where I'm just going to try and guess what they mean. So complexity of abundance is you have so many options. How do you narrow it down?
That sounds fair, yeah. You could do all sorts of stuff. You've got a bunch of cash, but how do you know what to do?
Right, whereas complexity of scarcity is you need more options, but you can't afford any.
You can't afford to do anything at all.
Is that about right?
That's about it, yeah. And so this is going sort of quite meta and high level straight away. But my take would be, if you really are, the more your resources are scarce. So where this came from was the principle in complexity is you can't predict what's going to work. So you have to adopt a portfolio strategy.
Try lots of different things.
Exactly. And expect that most of them won't work out, and that's okay. And obviously, if you're trying a portfolio strategy, you can't put all your eggs in one basket. And indeed, you can only have as many baskets as you have eggs.
Right, and I think what I've seen and like what we've seen increasingly is people still like to believe or pretend that they're taking this portfolio approach, but what the kind of subtext is that actually we can't afford for any of these to fail. It's like, yeah, let's try lots of different things. Let's experiment, baby. Let's let's go wild. But heaven forbid if they don't all work. It's not the name of the game.
It's not the name of the game. Or it's sort of, we're going to try all these things and see if they work, but we're not going to set any criteria by which we can tell if they're working or not. There's no way to stop any of them.
It's gonna march off into the sunset until the heat death of the universe.
Yep.
And also it reminds me of an episode we did, it must be about a year ago now, about Brat Summer, or this was triggered by an article by
Founder Mode.
Founder Mode. So basically, forget experimentation. Founder knows best. We're going to do this, and again, heaven forbid, it doesn't work. You'll be in trouble.
Yep, it's one of the traps that we talk about in the multiverse mapping course is this idea that if you go and you say, well, look, we think that this is the biggest risk, so shall we set pivot triggers and test this with a small probe? One of the answers you can get back is effectively, no, the strategy's good. If it fails, it's your fault. So you need to be aware that might be happening. And that for certain founders, some of the time, they would rather not have to employ you. They would rather just have everything happen automatically without having to deal with difficult people.
It's an understandable desire.
Yeah. Well, we have not brought on employees, have we?
Yes. Well, it's a Christmas. Good time to make a wish.
Yeah, it is. Maybe next year. But anyway, so what do you do if then you've got this portfolio you're running and then there's a change in the environment, such as zero interest rates go away and suddenly the cost of capital is way, way higher. The cost of your workforce is way, way higher. You have to cut one of them and you have to stop doing some of your portfolio. How do you handle that? That becomes the question. And this is that question of, well, if you've got that complexity of scarcity, my take is you're then moving through the complex domain and closer to chaos. And if you get to the point where actually you don't have any resources left, there's no runway left, there's no money left, there's nothing, then a portfolio strategy can't work. And that was the question that was fundamentally framed.
Right, I was just going to suggest let's talk about what triggered this topic, because it's We're heading into abstract land.
We're a little bit, but it was someone who's been talking with a bunch of execs who are saying basically they have to do AI-based transformation, but they have no money spare. They don't have the capital to hire like an expensive firm that knows what they're doing with it. They don't have the capital to run any experiments.
Right,
they have to just know how to do it.
Just know how to do it. It's transform and get it right first time.
Yeah.
With no money.
Yeah, which I'm sure happened loads. But it reminded me a little bit of, like, we like to go back to industrial era transformations. One of the corollaries that we started talking about in the thread was electricity and the rise of electricity, because that changed what you might call the substrate of industry. You move from this world of steam power and everybody having to have their own steam generation and sort of power generation built into their factory, to this world where you have an electricity grid and everybody can share this resource, this commodity across everywhere. So you start to, you get this totally different set of economic constraints, I suppose.
Let's localise this a bit. So where was this thread?
So this thread was on Cynefin Slack, a very nerdy place. And so we were saying, look, perhaps there's this situation that changing the compute layer to include a load of generative AI, agentic systems, blah, 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 all the hot topics that people are banging on about, perhaps that is a change in the substrate of how businesses operate, which could be mapped onto the change from steam to electricity. And so from that perspective, you can see some interesting sort of stories that might play out. For instance, there were people in the electricity age who would just add power to their existing factory layout. So keep the steam generated layout of factory, but stick electricity into it. And that didn't work. You just don't get the gains to make it worth doing. You've got to rethink how your factory works. And in fact, it wasn't for several decades and the emergence of Henry Ford's assembly line factory systems that you started to see how you could actually realise the efficiency gains of electricity.
Right, it reminds me of something we've talked about before, which you got from a book about refrigerated railway carriages, and how some slightly mad person put some lettuces in a carriage and shipped them across the United States. Yeah. And it didn't make them rich and famous.
No, it did make them famous.
It made them famous for probably reasons they were less happy about.
Yeah.
But then I'm trying to. My memory of this is a bit hazy, but basically, after a number of years, people did rethink this innovation in a way that it would work. Yeah. But it basically, you couldn't plug a new thing into an existing thing and expect it to magically work the way you want it to.
Exactly. Yeah. And the overarching story there is, it doesn't matter how smart you are, it doesn't matter how much money you throw at it. If you're trying to do the transformation before the conditions are ready, then it's not going to work. That's kind of the risk or one of the risks we were discussing when we were talking about these execs who have to do AI transformation. One question is, do they really have to? Is it actually an imperative right now? Or is it just the noise at the moment?
Well, the way it seems to go, and again, this is kind of reminding me of the conversation about the refrigerated carriages. People are going to want to kind of use new stuff when it comes up. They're going to use it in a way that isn't going to work, and then that kind of collapses, and then sometime down the line, it's done better. And is that like, can you even not short circuit? Can you take a shortcut around that? Or is that kind of just the way it has to go?
I feel like it's kind of the way it has to go. So here's the thing. I think you can get the benefits early, but most people underestimate how expensive that's going to be. You have to do enough experimentation at a high enough rate with enough capital that you can actually brute force figure out what it is that's going to work. And then you can get the benefits for a little while. Or another way to play it is to hold off and say, actually, we'll save our capital, We'll wait until it becomes clear what the new factory layout should be, and then we'll be able to make a very clear plan. We'll be able to hire someone who's done it 5 times before, and they'll already got some economies out of it, and we'll be able to share a plan with the bank and get credit, and then we'll refit the factory.
Right, yeah, that's
the
what I was
worst
gonna
place
say.
to be is in the middle between the two. Trying to rush to it early, but without the reserves, without the ability to actually
Sure,
figure
but
it out.
that's the thing about humanity. There are always going to be some people who just have to rush at something early. Like,
Yeah.
they're just wired that way.
Yeah.
And take those risks, and to hell with the consequences, right?
Yeah.
And like that is what enables other people to then build on that.
It is.
But it's, if you're thinking as an individual organisation and not at the systemic level, then yeah, what are your options as an organisation?
And it's interesting. You either get to be one of the experiments in the portfolio experiments, or you get to be the portfolio holder running lots of different experiments. And it's the lesson of, if you're a founder, be aware that the game for the VCs who are telling you what to do is very different than the game for you.
Right, because they've kind of got the system where things are expendable.
Yeah.
Whereas for you,
including you,
right? Whereas you don't see yourself as expendable.
No.
So yes, it is. Those are the kind of incentives behind the scenes.
That's true. And it's another angle that I didn't think about in the thread, but actually these execs then that we're talking about, who are under pressure to deliver this transformation, maybe they're just seen as expendable. Maybe they're, look, you've got to go and have a go at it, and it's fine for me if it doesn't work out, because I can just, it's your neck on the line, not mine. So maybe that's the answer.
Yes, I mean, I think we've both seen that kind of play out in real time, haven't we?
Yeah, it's not uncommon. It's
Not
one way of
uncommon.
doing experiments.
And sometimes, I mean, sometimes clearly it's not a surprise to the executives as well, right? They kind of are in on the game, and they know they can move on to the next thing and do it all again, and it'll all be fine. So I think it's not to be totally doom and gloom about it, but I think
Not at all. You get into that game because you know
get
what
into
you're
that
doing.
game, but it does catch people by surprise as well, and can be deeply unpleasant.
Yeah.
If you don't see it coming.
Yeah. So it's interesting. So then the question comes out, right? But what if you're in a situation where you are caught between the two? You can't wait because there's all this pressure, and you don't want to be left behind, whether that's real or imagined. You don't really have a choice. Your board is shouting, your boss is shouting, but you also don't have the resources to actually do a proper job of really experimenting. I mean, one thing I suggested was, if you're really at the point where you've got no resources left, then you have to focus on survival first. You have to just do the bare minimum basics to keep the business alive, to keep cash flow going, that sort of thing. And I actually told a story about, this was us at the beginning of the year, wasn't it? Where we'd had a lean several months and some surprise expenses, and suddenly it was like, oh dear, this is not good. And we had to pay a big tax bill, and we were struggling to meet that. And for all of our talk about experimenting and making bets and sort of navigating complexity, at that moment I really felt, and I told you about this at the time, I think, God, I would happily give somebody thousands of pounds if they could just give us the blueprint, the recipe that we could follow,
The right
and
answer.
have the answer, and have our business just work. And
But I mean, as tempting as it was, we didn't look for that, right? So I think, I mean, I think, why didn't we look for it? we were able to kind of out-logic it.
Well, yeah, we're able. Then you quickly see, but hang on a minute. Actually, there are loads of people who will absolutely sell you that, and they've got their books, they've got their systems, their blueprints, blah 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 blah. And then you look through them and you go, but actually, I can see something that's even worse than our business failing, and that's ending up running a business that we hate running.
That we hate, exactly.
That doesn't match our capabilities, that doesn't match our values, that does something in the world that we don't like. I'd rather not do that.
And I think actually, what from recollection, what we ended up doing was, it's one of the leading in complexity principles from the series of now several years ago, which is watchful waiting.
Yep.
Where I think we were flinging around loads of ideas. We could do drastic this, drastic that. You know, should we move to the north? What triggers can we pull to try and
live in a camper van?
Yeah, just to kind of fix this problem like right now. But I think we knew that a lot of the stuff that we were doing was still fairly new off the ground.
Yeah.
So the Master Multiverse, good Lord, I can't talk today. Master Multiverse Mapping course, that was, it had just been re-released in a new format, I think.
It had, yeah. It had been around for a couple of months, hadn't it?
And I think I was like, well, we haven't really given it enough of a chance. And then there were just a few things that were still fairly nascent. And I think we just realised it was too soon to say none of this is working. Yeah. Maybe we just have to keep doing the same and just see what happens for a bit longer.
Yeah. And so we had already placed a load of bets or started a load of experiments. And you're right, it was too early to see what was paying off. And it's really hard in that bit where it feels like nothing is paying off, but actually it's just a little bit too soon to tell.
Right, yeah. And while you're in that watchful waiting period, just keeping eyes and ears open for signals that are useful. And I feel like it was during that period that we got the nail in the coffin for our old brand. I think you'd seen a comment from somebody who didn't realise that it was our company about how terrible the name Trigger Strategy Group was.
Well, no wonder with a name like Trigger Strategy Group, they're obviously idiots.
And that was, I think it was the thing that tipped the balance. We'd been thinking for a long time, you know, this was a temporary brand. We need to do something about it. And actually that was the signal that pushed it to the top of the priority list.
Yeah.
And I mean, things are very different now. Who knows how much the brand really had to do with it? But I think
it's a question that's there. There's something about the congruence that it helped bring, isn't it? And it fits with like our vibe much better. Even though some people think we're a pub.
I mean, a pub is still a better association than some of the old ones.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it was. I feel like that was quite a good example of the value of watchful waiting and not doing knee-jerk panic decisions. Even though, like you say, I felt the same, right? Like, if we could just pay someone to tell us this is exactly the thing that you need to do, we would have robbed a bank and paid them that money, no problem.
Yep. And so that's the point that I made in the thread as well, was like, look, I understand how it feels to be that executive and feel like your hands are absolutely tied and you are scraping the barrel of your resources. And there is no time left to do an experimentation. You've just got to go for it now. And I think what you realise is, or what we realised in that moment was, as much as we wish we could know the answer, actually, no, the right answer was, like you said, watchful waiting. And things started to turn around. And the other thing was, I think the other thing that you do is pay attention to fundamentals. Pay attention to the absolutely... the stuff that's actually actively broken and is causing you real problems, which goes back to the brand. We realised that was probably actually broken and causing us problems.
Yeah. But coming back to the AI thing that needed to be launched.
Yeah.
It sounds like there's no opportunity for watchful waiting there. So if you've just got to barrel on and get something done... I'm trying to remember what all of those complexity, leadership in ambiguity and uncertainty principles. I'm trying to think which ones of those would apply if you've just got to just put the blinkers on and crack on with something. Yeah,
I mean, the thing that I think you're going to have to do if you are that executive is use an uncertainty bubble. Use the idea of the deliberate strategy is what we say to the board. The emergent strategy is what we actually do.
Interesting, right? So you tell the story that it's all like neatly tied up with a ribbon on it. We're doing exactly what everyone thinks we're doing, and this is exactly the outcome we're going to get from it. But you are allowing yourself to respond in real time to whatever happens as a result of what you're doing.
Yeah.
And make micro adjustments as you go.
Exactly. And I made the point that if your resources are smaller, then you make your experiment smaller, and you've got to start with something much, much smaller than you'd like. And I think, well, we've seen it with lots of clients we've worked with, and I've complained to you about it lots as well. I've rarely seen a situation like sometimes there are experiments which literally have to be that size and they couldn't be any smaller. CERN is a good example. The super collider, it has to be that big, it has to be that expensive in order to do what it can do. But in business, it's very rare that there's something that really has to be done at that scale on day one. What there does tend to be is almost a blindness or an inability to rethink, to challenge yourself to make it much, much smaller.
Or it's just the level of discomfort around, putting something out into the world that is ugly, scrappy, badly written, not fully thought through.
Yeah.
That is, you might kind of be aware that that's what you need to do, but the discomfort is just too high to want to go through with it.
There is. And then you've got the insidious fear of finding out. The fact that so people are often unwilling to test the core of their assumptions. This is a idea from Imre Lakatos, the philosopher. Any research program has a sort of soft, mushy layer of assumptions that are safe to test.
Right, yeah.
And then that central hardcore of assumptions, where if you test them, you're actually putting your company or your team out of a job.
It's the existential beliefs that you have that are, if you shatter those, then you kind of got nothing. You feel like you've got nothing to stand on.
Yeah. So what if you find out through your experiments in AI substrate transformation that your company actually has no business continuing to exist, or that your role at the company is no longer relevant? That's not something that's safe for you to experiment about.
Yeah, or even just that you find out that the world doesn't really work the way that you thought it does.
Yeah.
Like if that's a cherished belief that you have, that can feel as threatening as any of the other things you just mentioned.
Absolutely, especially if your identity is tied to the way that you see the world or the result that you're promising, which we've seen with more than a few founders, I would say, which makes it very hard to reorient and very hard to then actually adapt and become successful.
Totally.
You just can't.
Totally, yeah. And that stubbornness can also be a huge, asset.
Yep.
Because if you happen to luck onto something and you don't let people persuade you otherwise, and it turns out that you were right, you were one of the 100 or 1,000 founders who were right about something, then it served you well to be so stubborn.
Yep.
So it's one of those things that's not necessarily a bad thing, but you just have to be incredibly lucky.
Yeah. Be flexible or be very, very lucky. Those are your choices. It's something I think JP Castellin said this as well. When your assumptions meet reality and you find out they don't match reality, you've got two choices. One is to change your assumptions, and the other is the one that most people pick, and that's to try to change reality.
Oh,
that's
wow.
a lot harder.
I got goosebumps. Yeah. A neat summary.
But yeah, so going back to that electricity example, if you're suddenly the one who's tasked with, you need to redesign the factory layout in order to get the benefits of this new electricity that nobody really understands, well, why not build 5 or 6 scale models of the factory with putting like a small amount of electricity in and figuring out how would this work? I'm reminded of that classic scene from The Founder. Why don't you draw the factory layout on a tennis court and go and try pretending you're there and running it?
And that's where they're testing out new layouts for a fast food joint.
Yep, exactly. They invented the McDonald's fast food kitchen, which we started writing a piece about this, didn't we? Obviously was an amazing innovation, but is a really good illustration of unintended consequences as it changed the diet of the world, probably not for the better.
Yeah, I think it's a strong recommendation as a Christmas film to indulge in.
Starts joyful, ends miserable.
Like so many things in life. But I was going to say as well, I think another thing that makes this hard, doing a small scale model or a sort of uncomfortably imperfect model of something, is you have to know where you can and can't compromise, right?
Yeah.
So where can you cut corners and it still be a good test? I think that's something that is unbelievably hard to do.
It is.
Like you almost have to test your way to finding a good test.
That's true, yeah. And that's the one sort of mental trick which I think is worth playing, which is just assume you're going to have to do 1,000 experiments and then price them accordingly. Because if you think, well, we'll probably be lucky with our first one, we'll just put all our eggs in that basket, then you're going to be scuppered. But if you realise you can have to do 1,000, well, you might get lucky after 50, after 200. but at least you're heading in the right direction. And the trick with it is start really small and cheap so you can throw the vast majority of what you do away, then scale it up as you get more confidence, as you understand more, as the stuff that you have to figure out does become genuinely more expensive. At least you've figured out the basics enough that you're not doing stupid things.
Right, but yeah, that makes sense. A hypothetical question. How did they get to the point of realising that the thing they needed to innovate around was the layout of the kitchen?
Oh, that's a really good example.
Because I like what you're saying about testing loads of different things to see where there are gains to be had.
Yeah.
Like I know it's a somewhat fictional film based on reality to a degree, but like I guess we can't know what else was done before they got to doing that scene with the chalk on the ground.
Yeah. It's a good question. Yeah,
I think. How do you know what's your kind of limitation that you could?
Right. Well, you've said the word limitation. So one way is if you understand the bottleneck, and I seem to remember they had this conversation about, well, if this is going to work, we have to be able to make a burger get in your hands within 3 minutes, something like that.
Right. So they started with a kind of wishful goal, and then thought, okay, how do we?
With our current kitchen, it takes 15 minutes.
Interesting.
So we're going to have to do a radical rethink.
So in a way, that almost is like, so that reminds me of a lot of corporate visions where it's someone just kind of has this idea that sounds really nice. I want to be able to do that, but they don't know yet if it's possible. Like the idea of getting someone a burger in their hands in 3 minutes. No idea if that's possible, but let's see if we can do it. Let's see if we can expect. Valid. That's valid.
It's valid. And then you go, okay, so what are the actual constraints? So there's two ways. One is look at the bottlenecks and experiment absolutely aggressively on the one bottleneck. The other, which we tend to use a lot with clients, which is very instructive, I think, is where is your greatest uncertainty? So if you break down the bigger problem into a bunch of smaller chunks, which of these are you the most uncertain about? I.e., which of these have you not done before or don't have confident experience in from before? And the reason for that, and you start with those, you start with the places where you're most uncertain, because that is, number one, where you're most likely to get blown up by stuff you don't know. But number two, it's where you're most likely to find innovations that you couldn't have thought of if you didn't go and explore it. Because it's incredibly generative, going and exploring those.
Right, and so with the burger in your hands in 3 minutes, it's like, well, that increase in speed is we have no idea if that's possible. We wouldn't know how to go about it, so we better experiment.
Yeah.
And
we can't just move around the kitchen physically.
We'll just run. We'll just sprint around the existing kitchen.
Oh, well, I was thinking, it would be very expensive for us to shut down the restaurant and physically move the cooker around, etc.
Yes. I think it's a good example for, like, once you've got this pie in the sky vision, that if you're going that route and you're just like, I want to see a world where X is possible, and then like doing genuine experiments to see if that is possible. I think often what we see happening is someone has this pie in the sky vision, and it's like, right, now you make that vision happen, and I don't care if it turns out not to be realistic.
Yeah,
you're bloody well gonna do it.
Yeah. That is it.
And you're not allowed to experiment.
No experimenting, or if you do experiment, it's got to succeed. But you get trapped then. So where people get trapped, I think you've already sort of identified it. One is not wanting to find out where you're wrong. So you just won't actually design the experiment in such a way that you could find out that you're wrong. Then sunk cost. Getting to the point where actually your identity is so tied up with this, or you've put so much money into it already, you actually can't now change it. Those are some big things that you've got to really avoid.
I think that you do it with chalk is maybe quite a good forcing function.
It is.
You've got to make an experiment using only chalk.
Yeah, because it then what you're doing is tying your hands. It cannot be permanent. No one can set that up as a permanent thing using chalk. It's very cheap.
You can't do anything in high fidelity with chalk.
Yeah, that's it. It reminds me of fat marker sketches from Shape Up as well. Use a fat marker because then you can't get stuck in the details. You have to just do the big shapes, which is nice. someone else who's always worth watching, because I think you make a great point. How do you design an experiment so that it actually tests the stuff that matters and you don't get sort of sidetracked on something else? One thing that's worth considering is opportunity method format, which we've talked about before. OMF, it's one of the early podcasts, isn't it? Often people get over fussy about format and the details of how something looks and overlook the importance of method, because you can deliver the same method as a book, as a video, as an app, as a live coaching experience, as an event,
podcast episode.
Yeah, exactly. So great. Try whatever's cheapest of that for you to do. Then once you've figured out that the method works, well, then you can fiddle about with the format. But if you get stuck on a format, like it has to be an app, for instance, then you can get really stuck. And someone who's really good to watch on this is Tom Chi, who I'm sure I've talked about before.
He was the Google Glass man.
He was.
Yes.
Yep, and just the joy he has and the ability to whip up something using coat hangers and bits of string that tests high concept sort of tech is incredible.
Right, so the Google Glass story, and correct me if I've got the details wrong, but just to kind of even test the viability of it as a physical thing.
Yep.
Was he just added weights to a pair of glasses and then wore them, and
so
then realised...
he had just a length of wire, and then bits of plasticine and paper, which he could weigh out and make the same size as the components they would have to use to make the Google Glass work. So he made the components he needed and a length of wire, and then he tried out lots of different arrangements for how you could put those components on the headband. And
the outcome was that they were horribly uncomfortable.
Oh no, the outcome was he found out how to make them comfortable.
How to make them comfortable.
He found out why almost all headsets and VR headsets are uncomfortable, and it's because it puts the weight on the bridge of the nose. Yeah. And what he learned through half a day of fiddling about with plasticine is that you've got to put the fulcrum on the ears. And once the weight is supported by your ears, you can wear it for ages. And it takes the weight off the nose and it makes it all comfortable.
I'm so glad that one of us has a good memory.
He also did a really good test because they were thinking about, I think it was Google Glass and the world where it could be like that Minority Report computer with Tom Cruise waving his arms around and moving things in the air. And so they were thinking, right, what would that be like? They couldn't simulate that for real. So he got 2 lengths of string, tied it onto somebody's arms, and then had the lengths of string go through a loop and down to a pair of chopsticks which were hinged so that they'd hit keys on a laptop. And then they had a projector projecting onto a bed sheet. So you could have this computer projector showing you different images from a photo collection on this screen, and then by swiping with your right hand or your left hand, you would be able to change which photo you were looking at. So it's very it's low fidelity. It's a fat marker sketch version of what it would be like to use one of these computers. But again, in half a day of playing, what they discovered is actually they're agony to use. You can't hold your hands up above your heart height and play with this thing without your arms getting tired. At which point they thought, wow, well, Tom Cruise must just be that hench. And he was presenting this, he tells the story later in one of them, I think, which is he was presenting this at a conference, and someone in the audience came up afterward and said, actually, I worked on Minority Report. Tom Cruise couldn't do it either. It took us days to film that because he had to take breaks all the time.
There we go. Could have just interviewed Tom Cruise from the outset.
Could have done, yeah. But it's amazing. The thing that's exciting with the Tom Chi stuff is it feels like they were doing the experiment in order to learn something very specific. But actually, that's never what it was. It was, what if we play around with the stuff that we've got and figure out what we don't know yet? What are the questions we don't know to ask yet? Because no one was asking, are you going to be able to hold your hands up and use this computer for long enough for it to be comfortable? They didn't know what they didn't know yet. And that's the magic of going towards this sort of experiment, this sort of prototype.
And I guess this might hypothetically have been one of 100 similarly kind of random experiments to see how it could work.
Exactly.
I think that
I bet he bodged together a bunch of other things that didn't really work.
The thing I think I keep coming back to with these wonderful stories that you're so very good at remembering is that they always fall into almost a similar trap of, you do that one brilliant experiment and that solves all the problems for you, and you don't see the cutting room floor with all the other experiments that were uninteresting, or they told you something that you didn't want to know. I think I just think that's worth remembering.
Massively important. Yeah, and I think about, we've done, even with our clients in the last year, we try experiments, and most of the time it's like, that's not getting at what we need to know. That didn't work. That was we're looking in the wrong place. But it does teach you enough to go, right, let's do a different experiment. Let's look in a different place. And then we do find out. And we've got better at it. It's practice, isn't it? You get better at figuring out.
It's practice. And when you know that that's the likely path that a piece of work is going to take, you start to find it exciting. And when you get better at planning very light touch experiments, it is very easy to then say, okay, well, let's try this next, and do that very, very quickly, like the next day even. Yeah. And you kind of go on this journey where it doesn't, if something doesn't quite go the way you think it's going to go, it's not a sort of, tiny violin, let's all go to the pub type situation. It's but now we could try this instead, or we could try that. Yeah. And it just becomes actually a celebratory part of the process.
That's it. Yeah. Which is the whole, there's that apocryphal Edison quote, isn't it? Which is, I haven't failed, I've just found another way that didn't work.
That's a good one.
So that's good. So then one final thought for this exec who's forced into putting AI into place. I remember a study that I think I told you about at the time. So this is quite fun. It's a good example of obliquity. They had two groups of employees. Well, they had a group of employees, divided it into two groups for the sake of the experiment. And they gave each of them access to LLMs. And one group, they told, find ways to improve your productivity using LLMs. The other group, they said, use LLMs to do stuff that you hate doing. Now, can you guess which group got great productivity gains?
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
So not the ones who are trying to improve productivity, which then gives you an interesting angle for, right, if you are forced to adopt AI in some way, or forced to adopt any technology, look around at the stuff you hate most and see, can you use it for that?
Is that because you just are more motivated to find something that works?
Oh, interesting. I think it's because we probably underestimate how much of a drag on our productivity and energy levels the stuff we hate is.
Right, so that is then a question of motivation.
Yeah, I think so. Well, we're motivated. I suppose you're motivated to find something that works, but you also get I'm totally spitballing here, but there's a compounding effect where if you can take stuff you hate doing off your plate, then that gives you more time doing stuff that you perceive as higher value, more stuff that you actually should be using your time on.
So motivation.
Sort of motivation, yeah. And then so there's a nice example from a Rob Snyder post that I was reading today, which is nobody wants AI. People are not buying AI. What his pull model of demand is no, everybody has projects to do. There's stuff on your to-do list, and some of it is stuff you would rather not have to do. But you have to do it because it's part of your bigger picture. One of these things is for, I think it's financial advisors he was talking about. And for regulatory and legal reasons, they have to take a very specific structured set of notes for every client call that they have, which means that they spend as much time as they spend on the client call preparing and then finishing up these notes. And they don't like doing that. It's very repetitive. It's very boring. But it's there on their calendar. And then this particular AI note taker was designed, which solved the problem for them. It had a different privacy setting, I think, so that it was not illegal for them to use it in the first place. So that helped. And it also understood how their notes needed to be structured so it could do the note taking for them and just take that task off their plate. Now that AI tool has had a massive like off-ramp takeoff, boom, sort of, gets selling like hotcakes. It's not because it's AI, it's because it does something that is on people's to-do list that they would rather not have to do.
Right, and I guess it thinking at it from a different angle. If you're kind of being challenged to use AI to replace doing something that you actually like, that you feel is valuable, you're not motivated to actually want to do something productive with that.
Oh yeah,
right?
That's it.
Like you're almost motivated to deliberately sabotage it so you can say, haha, I can't be replaced.
It's not as good as me. Yeah.
So yeah, that makes sense.
That does. Yeah, and that's the question you see everywhere is how can I use AI to be more productive? And I think you've got to go at it more obliquely than that.
That's a topic that's come up many a time. If you try and do something innovative with a specific goal in mind, it's less likely to work than if you just be curious about it and play around. Or now do it for something you hate.
Yeah. But it's a fun way to think about it. And then this idea as well that nobody wants a car. People want to get from A to B. And before cars existed, they were using horses. Now we're using cars. But as soon as like hovercraft come in or flying plane, whatever, teleportation. If teleportation was invented, no one wants a car anymore at that point. So the technology itself is actually irrelevant to a large degree. And then you think about, we're back to the question of this AI transformation and is the substrate changing? Is everybody forced then to upgrade how their business works because of AI technology? Well, as with electricity, as with cars, as with everything, the substrate changes through the decisions of billions of individual people. It doesn't just change. It has to be better for that person there and that person there in their individual choice right now today.
And what you're saying is like it's not, it's the will of the people and the decisions that they make that evolve. That means that the substrate changes. It's not somebody saying, I want to change the substrate. Yeah, we're going to swap this for that.
You can't top down it.
You can't top down it. It comes from the bottom.
Yeah. Which then it's an interesting reframe for those execs, which is like, right, the problem you've got is you are being told to deliver an outcome that's emergent and you can't directly make it happen. So it comes back to that trick again, doesn't it? Of like, well, whatever your resources are, you've got to break down your situation into small enough pieces that you can then experiment and not run out of money. And find the things that do get people going, yeah, all right, I'll do that then. Until eventually, one day you realise, oh, the substrate's changed. When did that happen?
Nice. That feels like an endpoint.
It does.
Will we hear how this AI launch thing goes?
I doubt it. The conversation then devolved into realising that, or claims that you should try and get security clearance, otherwise you won't be privy to the right conversations. So I'm not quite sure where it's going, but
Well, good luck to whoever it was.
Indeed.